I'll put myself as notes since I started.
Great, thanks, Michael. Okay, so we don't have an agenda yet, but welcome to everyone to the February 11th, 2021 Flux Dev Meeting. That's about the most official we can get. Thanks, Michael, for taking notes, and I'm just moderating it. So we don't have to be any more formal than that. How are you all doing?
A bit cold, but getting there.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. We have both Chris and Jonathan from Microsoft.
How cold is it in London now?
It's sort of hovering around or just below 0. It's not super cold, just colder than I'm used to.
Understood. Yeah, same. So oh, by the way, Chris and Jonathan and Hida, we're recorded, just letting you know, and it's available publicly. So I think you all know that, but just wanted to say that. But yeah, Michael, it's pretty cold in New York. It was in the 20s when I arrived on Monday. I had gone to visit a very good old friend in San Juan. So this background is totally virtual. I'm actually back in New York. But yes, it was, again, I knew what it was going to be like, but it was a bit of a physical shock to go from amazing warm weather where, you know, my hair is naturally curly and my skin is just soaking it all in to like stepping off the plane again into 20-degree weather. But yes. Oh, so I'll post the doc again for people who just joined. You know, go ahead.
Does anyone want to add agenda items? Jordan, did you want to talk about UI stuff, or are you just hanging out today?
Sorry, I was muted there. I don't have anything to share at the moment, just making slow progress. Happy to answer any questions, but nothing to share, just spectating mostly.
Okay, thanks. Chris and Jonathan, anything you want to bring up? We're just hanging out for today as well.
Yeah, nothing for me. Jonathan, do you have anything today?
Yeah, nothing for me either. Also just spectating.
Okay, cool. All right, should be an easy one then.
I'll go ahead and add a topic.
I added a topic to discuss the 0.8 release preparation.
And now that's made me think of a topic to put in, so. Okay, no, image.
Okay, we have a few topics. Should we go ahead and get started on them, and people can still fill in as ideas come to your head? Please just put them at the bottom. We'll go in order. Okay, go ahead, Stefan. The release. Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Yeah. I have 2 mute buttons to make sure I don't talk when it's not necessary. Yeah, so I've put up a checklist for the 0.8 release, trying to gather all the, let's say, important changes and bug fixes from all the controllers, CLIs, documentation, and so on. Have an overview of what this release means. And this release is let's say an important milestone because we are finally at feature parity with Flux version 1. I don't think we can start the timer without promoting the image update APIs to beta, so people will know for sure, hey, if I'm not migrating to something that will break in a way that I have to rewrite all my configs again. So we are still delaying the timer for that. And a couple of things I want to discuss here. So the end goal will be to make the release tomorrow, but judging by what's happened today, I don't really know if we can make it. So there are a couple of things I want to bring up. First, around the image automation things. So we have a blocker around libgit 2, Azure DevOps. We are not able to write back to an Azure DevOps repo. No surprises there, but yeah, Michael is working on a fix. Meanwhile,
So there's a PR for that. It just needs a couple of other things to be merged or released or something, and then it's ready.
Do we know the reason for this issue?
Yes, the reason is that I left in a hardwired value for the implementation in one of the lines in there.
Yeah.
So it was when it was preparing the callbacks for authentication, it would always use the go get ones. So even when it was using libgit2, it would basically have no callbacks, and so it would fail the host key check.
Okay.
So that was an easy fix. Actually proving that it was fixed has taken days.
yes. Yeah, and so we cannot merge that until we release source controller, because we've renamed and refactored the Git package in source controller. So we need to get the SSH ports fixes inside source controller. I think we just did that. I think that's merged. So we need to release source controller, then update everything to it. And yeah.
There is one, Stefan, there is one PR left. 290. 288 just got merged and 290 is left. And that's for the different types of different hash types.
Yes. Did you leave some comments there?
Yeah, I left a tiny nitpick comment, but otherwise it looks okay.
Yeah, I'll get it done after this meeting. In that case, then we can get it merged.
Yeah, I've looked at this and I thought it's been merged. But yes, so we need to merge this, release it. Then Michael needs to rewrite the pull request and refactor everything around the new Git structure.
No, it's already done.
Oh,
so it doesn't build at present because it uses the new one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I was working against my own copy locally, so yeah.
Great. Okay, so let's say this one can be checked tomorrow. Other things that we need to do is we've added 2 features. One is the fact that now you can create policy based on numerical ordering, which works great with build IDs and other numbers. And that's merged, but there is an issue on adding the numerical order to the Flux CLI. So we have the alphabetical order, we have the semver, we have the regex, but we are missing that. So we cannot do the CLI changes until we release the API, so we get the new field in there. Once we release the new the image policy API, it should be, I don't know, 15 minutes change. Also also around the documentation. So Michael, you wrote the image automation migration guide, and it looks great, but I think we should change it and tell people use numeric even for numerical ordering, even if you do timestamps, Unix epoch count. So
Yeah, sure. I don't mind doing that.
So it needs some little.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I had a section that was a bit like that we took out because we didn't have numerical ordering. Yeah. But I can put that back in and rejig it a bit. That's not a problem. Yeah.
Cool. So, and Philip added the CA, the certificate authority validation for self-sign to source controller and source controller API, but after we release source controller, we have to add that to Flux create source and Flux create secret. Right? People, when they create a source or a secret, they should be able to provide the file. So we embed the CA file in there, because now, you cannot use the CLI if you have self-sign certs, and you should be able to do that. That's also a straightforward change. We just need to copy the flag from, I don't know, create Helm secret, for example, that already has the CA file in there. But that's also something that needs to happen after we release the controller. So there are a couple of things that we need to work on in the Flux 2 repo that are kind of depending on releasing controllers. I don't know if we can manage all of that tomorrow, but I'm more confident now that libgit 2 things have been solved. Or we can delay it for next week. I don't know.
I think it's okay to have for instance, the numeric ordering in the API, but not represented in the. I mean, it's nice to have things lined up, but it's not unusual for the API to lead the command line by a wee bit.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about it. It's like a really easy change.
Sure, but coordinating it is an easy change, but coordinating it does take time, because it needs to go back and forth, and PR there needs to be approved and then merged and then released, and then something can happen over here. And maybe it's the same with the self-signed certs, unless that particular feature is really it's quite sought after, right? It's quite important.
We still need to do an API release. It's an API change.
Okay.
So we cannot.
Yeah.
I cannot. Yeah.
Are we going to offer that in the bootstrap command also, in case someone wants to bootstrap with self-signed certs? Actually, that won't work, would it? Technically, you could run like your own GitHub instance and then run self-signed certs and have like.
No. So CA validation works only for libgit 2. We cannot use libgit 2 in the CLI. So no bootstrap. Yeah. No bootstrap for Azure, no bootstrap for self-signed certs.
And we are just to check, we're saying also then that the whole client cert credential thing, that we're skipping that in the form of parity with Flux v1.
Can you say it again? I didn't.
So that issue that I solved like half that issue. So there is an issue regarding certificate injection for Git repositories, and that issue describes partly the CA part, like basically giving your own CA and saying I've verified the certificate authority, and the second part was sending with a client key and cert.
Yeah, and MTLS and all of that. Like Flux One doesn't have support for MTLS with a Git server. I haven't heard anyone besides that person that posted there that they have MTLS. libgit 2 doesn't support it. GoGit doesn't support it. And libgit 2 actually, the maintainers person from GitHub actually rejected that and said, no, MTLS doesn't make sense for Git. So I I will just close that issue and say, hey, we have support for self-sign, but we are not going to work on MTLS anytime soon.
Yeah, and like that issue that you referred to that I found was basically, he was like, unless somebody feels happy to implement this is not going to be priority, which means that it will probably not happen in the near future.
Yeah,
and we're dependent on that. So okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of Flux One users that have self-hosted GitLab servers with self-sign certs, and for those, the CA validation that we've added is gets you that that feature. You can connect to a Git server with self-sign. So I'm very happy with what we have here and not pursue any more TLS things for now.
We just need to add a documentation in the image automation controller saying that what stated in the source controller actually also works for image automation controller.
So I'm not quite convinced that if when we add things to source controller, they also work with image automation controller. I have no clue if image automation controller now works with self-sign.
It should, because it's importing the package and the package still takes the secret. So technically, even if it's not documented, if you just pass the CA file key in the secret is passed by image automation controller, right? When you're creating your authentication callback.
Yeah, but we need to wire that into image automation controller, which is, it doesn't happen magically by just importing the package. I mean, in the image automation controller, we have to query for the secret, we have to take the secret, then pass it, right?
Well, it's already doing that, right? To do the authentication. And yes. Because the way we implemented it, we basically just added an extra key and the secret that's given to. That's given to.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes, so, you're right. It should.
I just read through the code like after we merged this, and I realized that technically, even though we don't document it, image automation controller should support self-sign certs also.
Yeah. So the CA file is declared in the Git package.
Yeah.
Yeah. It should work. I don't know if it will, but
if it uses the auth strategy or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The push path is slightly different because that's not something that is used in the source controller, but it uses the same auth struct.
Okay.
So as long as it works with that, it should still work.
Yeah. So if it calls the auth secret strategy, that one takes the secret as the parameter, and in there we handle CA and everything. And if that's reused for Git push, then you should be able to push to a self-sign Git server. Yeah, it remains to be proven, but in theory it works. Okay.
Stefan, could I just ask you one question about that release? I know we haven't announced it formally anywhere, but it has been mentioned on a number of calls that I've been on, including mentioned by you, that we will, at least on one of them, that we plan to have a certain time period, the timer that you're talking about, and I think what was thrown around was 6 months of support for V1 after V2 reaches full feature parity with V1. Mm-hmm. So the only thing I wanted to ask is, could we, since we, as you've said, we can't start counting until docs and API stuff, a few things are updated. Can we be, just from a community messaging point of view, could we please be careful not to say that that this release represents fully reaching feature parity with V1? You may not have any plans to do that anyway, but do you understand what I mean? Because some people who heard those things may be very confused if that we're not starting that support window at that time.
The timer has to wait until there's stable API release. Is that correct? The beta release, at least? Yeah. So even if we are at feature parity, we can't really start the timer until.
Yeah, you understand what I mean though, because of what we've said in the past, or what several people have said in the past at least, publicly, can we just make sure not to claim that we've reached full feature parity with this release?
Yeah, what I think we could do is after the release, we should definitely update the roadmap.
Yeah.
And we can specify in there, we can add to the roadmap the image update stabilization and say there in the roadmap, after this is done, the timer starts. So everybody that looks at the roadmap could easily understand where we at today.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would recommend that we, even if we believe we've reached feature parity in a beta, I would recommend that we not actually say, all right, now go until we actually release the full GA release. That way we have a little bit more, we're showing our users that we have, that they can trust our Semver releases, you know, and that we're essentially making a promise to them. You know what I mean?
I totally disagree with this.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
In what
GA
way?
has nothing to do with feature parity.
So that's true. Should we just clarify our messaging then and make sure that we're very clear? I mean, in that case,
we don't mention GA in our roadmap or anywhere in any docs. Where have you seen that?
I have not seen that. All I mean is we say we're following Semver.
Yeah.
And this is ultimately, once we say that we are not going to be, once we say that we are going to make our next major version bump, we're essentially committing that people can trust that we will have backwards compatibility.
No.
So feature parity is not necessarily 1.0. It's what I think Scott is trying to get across. And I think that we could all agree on that.
Yeah, and 1.0 doesn't mean that we don't have backwards compatibility. So backwards compatibility in terms of APIs are set at the API version level, not
right.
at the binary version level.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, we had spoken about that before, and I agree with that. I'm primarily thinking about the actual Flux/Flux2 repo, which as far as I understand it's really the SDK and the CLI only. So we're committing at this point to maintain with some rigor the CLI commands. You know, for example, at that point we'll never remove flags. We'll only add them if someone needs to work around that or some additional change. We won't change the command names, things like that. So people can start to trust that they'll be able to use this in their automation. And the SDK that people are building controllers on top of will, from that point forward, support backwards compatibility so that they can trust that they won't have to re-architecture their whole thing, you know. And that's really it. Does that sound like we're on the same page? I just wanted to make sure that I understand.
So I would not link the timer for people to start moving from V1 to V2 to a GA release of the CLI. I'll link the timer to I don't know, a release of all our APIs, which you call SDK. I would call APIs, custom resource definitions.
Yeah.
Once all of those are on beta, then we ensure backwards compatibility between them. That means we will develop admission webhooks And even if we change stuff, we'll write custom code to transform from the old version to the new version. So people can migrate without, rewriting all the YAMLs or having downtime on the Flux side. That doesn't mean we cannot change CLI commands and so on. The CLI is just a helper for the Flux controllers. Flux is not Helm. Flux is all about server-side things, controllers, and API. The API is the most important thing. Like, you can drive the whole stuff only from Git, no CLI at all. You can use Terraform to bootstrap, then use Git. The CLI is just a helper.
So are we saying that we don't strictly follow Semver in that case?
We follow Semver.
No, well, what I mean is in Semver,
that premise will happen before 1.0, so it still follows Semver, I think is what.
Oh, I see what you're saying. We'll do the promise before then. Okay.
It's stronger than
we are at zero something. We can do whatever. That's
true. We can. That's true. Okay. I get that. That sounds okay. Will we not make our major version lined up with, and I'm talking about for the primary Flux, package itself, or release itself. Do we not want to make our major version line up with what we're saying our versions are for Flux? For example, Flux v1 was 1.x.x. Flux v2, do we want Flux v2 to be 2.x.x, and or do we just not want to align those?
We have had this discussion before. As we saw back then, the fact that it's a completely newly engineered thing with a new design, etc., does make it basically not a 2.0 because it doesn't inherit anything from Flux 1 or the thing. It's Flux 2, and the binary is also called different because with Flux you have the Flux daemon, which has its own binary, and you have Flux cuddle, which is the other binary, and with Flux v2 we just have Flux, so there shouldn't be any confusion.
Yeah, so in summary, we should be clear for anyone who might be confused that Flux release 1.0.0 is the Flux 2 version.
Yeah, right? like the repo says, Flux 2. But we are so far from 1.0.0.
You can understand why I'm asking, though, right? I mean, many projects in this space align their major version with their major, what they call their project when they move from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, right?
What did Linkerd 2 do exactly? That is the relevant precedent I can think of in the CNCF.
Yeah, Linkerd 2, exactly. Linkerd 2 went from pre-release version, or not pre-release, but major version 0 releases to 2.0.0, and is still on 2.x. It doesn't mean that we need to follow exactly what they do, but we are our own project, and I just wanted to bring up the topic in our meeting with other people on, just to summarize. And if we're saying that that we are going to do it differently, that's totally fine. But I do think it would be nice to clarify that in the docs somewhere. Because some people will most definitely be confused.
It will be a problem for sure if people come with a version number of Flux v2 and say Flux 1.x, and I'm not sure that this will ever actually happen because Flux 1.x is already on 1.20 whatever. But if Flux v2 makes it to a version number as high as that, probably there'll be no Flux v1 users left at that point.
Hopefully.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think
exactly. If you say what version of Flux and someone starts saying I'm on, Flux 1.1.8 or whatever, and we already have Flux 2 at 1.8, there's certainly some possibility for ambiguity. I'm not saying that that should stop us from changing it, but I would just like to clear, I'll just make a PR to clarify that once we get to that point. I just wanted to make sure we level set and we're understanding. So thanks. I don't want to belabor this.
Can we have a discussion about, can we create a discussion about this in Flux 2? Or maybe that's not, maybe it should be a discussion open for everybody.
Sorry, Philip?
Could you create a discussion for this topic? Because I actually, now when you're, I'm kind of on your side now thinking about it. So I'm like, yeah, that's kind of, it makes sense, especially if other projects do the same thing.
I could create a discussion topic if the project maintainers of that repo want me to, but I don't want to confuse anyone further. I guess it wouldn't hurt to make a discussion topic if you just want to give the answer there. Then that would be more easily found than this recording of the meeting. Then that would be fine. I'm not trying to dictate what's going on. I was just giving some of the pros and cons that I'm aware of. I can't dictate. I'm just. I do think though that I feel fairly strongly that if we do go this route, we just need to explain it. That's all. But I'll how about that? I'll do the discussion and we can just make that more public one way or the other. So thank you.
I don't have a lot of experience in this area, but I can say from a program management point of view, the less confusion you have, the better.
Okay, I'll make the discussion and leave it at that. Thanks, Stefan and everyone. So happy to move on to the next topic. Actually, the next topic is mine, but I'll be much shorter about this. Basically, just wanted to give an update to everyone on the Flux project status. As you know, Flux has been applying for incubation status, which should be quite a simple task. It probably would be not a long distance from there until or that much that needs to be done between there and graduation, mainly because we're doing so much diligence. There's so much diligence in getting things really right for incubation. So it has gone, the due diligence document was complete. There was a 2-week period that is not quite over yet, but there were a few days left on that where there's an internal review, and then there will be a response. So we've gotten an initial response today about, there's just a few items that need to be clarified. Once that's done, then there will be a few days before the CNCF TOC the CNCF TOC meeting to then say, yes, it's an incubation, or no, it's not an incubation. So that's the update. Whose item was the Flux V1 maintenance item?
Sorry, Scott, on that
yes. Okay.
Flux incubation, the requested clarification, are you talking about Liz Rice's
email? I am.
Okay. On
That's
the public
exactly.
comments
Yes.
thread.
Yep.
Okay. And do you know from your experience, like what bearing that has on the actual process? Like,
yeah.
Obviously, it sort of matters what someone says there, but is this a sink or a thing that could sink it, or is it
no? I don't think
more information?
My honest opinion is no. I don't think it could sink it. I think it's more about just making sure that we have level set with them and we've synced, so that when CNCF makes the announcement, they don't say things that are just totally untrue. Okay. They don't want egg on their face when they make the announcement. Basically, they don't want us to say, "Oh, well, actually, no, it's totally different." Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Ta.
Any other questions about that? I think it's a pretty short one, just in case. Sounds like no. Okay. So okay, great. Kingdon, you want to bring up yours?
there is a pull request open for Flux v1.21.2. And there's a discussion item about adding a new maintainer for Flux. I'm not sure if this needs to be put through governance process or a motion and vote is sufficient, or whether everyone's even present. So we could do a vote today, but I've been working on the Flux v1 repo, and it's been an obstacle that I can't push to the release branch for CI. So I've been working with the maintainers, and they've been very helpful, and hasn't been insurmountable so far. We could keep this up for some time if we have to, but Michael proposed that I could become a maintainer, and I think I'd be in favor of that.
I'm definitely in favor of that.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. And so I just went and checked. The maintainers are me, Stefan, and Hida. So as long as we agree here and record it somewhere as being agreed, then I guess it's being recorded, video recorded. So that's on the public record. And then we could refer to it when we make a change.
If he's the one I've been bothering more than anyone, so.
I will say yes. So now you're officially in, I think.
Cool.
Someone needs to edit.
Yeah, I'll figure out the right change to make and refer back to this meeting, and then we can all put a thumbs up on it or something. It'll make things a lot easier for you, I think, Kingdon.
Thank you.
All good.
Hey, I just wanted to check the governance doc, and that's essentially what it does say. So lovely. Yeah. So just Hida, Michael, and Stefan. Looks like consensus was reached. Very cool. Woo woo. Okay. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so Michael, is the image automation migration point your topic?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Do you mind just filling in the last couple of minutes of notes while I about?
Absolutely, I will take on that, so you don't have to take your own notes.
Oh yeah, on something different while I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and Michael,
okay, thanks.
Sorry, just to make sure do you mind if I move the minutes up under each topic? I think that's what we've done in the past.
Oh, is it? Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. No biggie. Just a question. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So image update. Right. So I've written a guide for migrating from using the automation that's in Flux v1 to using the automation that's in Flux v2. It's pretty comprehensive. I went through it as I was writing it with a worked example. There's not that many things, there's not that much optionality, if you like, in V1's automation. So it's not actually super difficult to tell people how to use the new stuff in an equivalent way. That most of the tricky stuff is about kind of retooling the Flux v2 thing so that, like, replacing the secret so that you have write access, and there's different ways to arrive at the starting point of having a Flux v2 installation. So I kind of have to account for those. So the agendum is mostly about how should we get to a point where we're happy with that migration guide. Like, should we try and run it on a bigger example if we can find one? Or try and find someone to try it out for us? Or just have lots of eyes on it?
So we have a couple of users that have migrated or are in the process of migrating, and one user had an issue with Circle CI because they cannot inject date minus s. They use some Circle CI orb or whatever pre-made script that tags things, and you can add the Circle CI build ID after the SHA. So we have branch SHA like it was before, and now we say, hey, use the date or some number or something as the last suffix, as the suffix. And he had many issues with injecting the timestamp there, right? And that's why I said, okay, why aren't we just making numerical ordering so people can use whatever the CI offers? Jenkins has a build ID, Circle CI has a build ID, not GitHub Actions, but everybody else has a build ID.
Are those reliable as serial numbers though?
Yes.
Or are they?
Circle CI, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I actually ran into this exact situation testing image automation. The issue I have with the timestamp is when I tagged just doing date-s, in my make file, like the Docker build and the Docker tag weren't in sync there. I think is so I was working with writing it to a file and reading the file, so that it's like exactly when the build starts. And I was like, screw it, I'll just use the build ID because that's really what I care about anyway. The one thing that I noticed on GitHub Actions, and I don't know if this is is that they don't increment the build ID if you just manually rerun the job. So I was like, could that potentially cause issues? I guess so. Something to keep in mind is like, when do they increment the build ID or the run ID? So they don't seem to increment it when you click it manually.
Yeah, that's why I said GitHub Action doesn't quite offer a build ID that fits our needs. I'm going to write a small GitHub action that does the right thing, and maybe we can put it in the guide. It's a small bash script that takes the branch, the short SHA, and appends the timestamp in the correctly, and it gives you a variable that you can use anywhere in your GitHub workflow. So you can just add it to the Docker build step, or I don't know, build X or whatever you are using.
Great. Yeah, for anybody listening, it was the issue now that I think about it was the Docker build and the Docker push were out of sync with the timestamp. So I was trying to mess around with writing it to a file and reading the file, but just gave up on it.
Yeah. Instead of using files, you can. So there is a thing in GitHub Actions where you can define variables in a step, in an action. Then you can use that variable all over the place. It will never change. So the timestamp will be the same.
Nice. Yeah.
But that will
I was trying to keep it as vendor agnostic as possible, but ended up just going with build numbers. So that'll be great to have an action that does it right.
Yeah.
So in the guide, I've given an example of how to do it with GitHub Actions that I think uses that facility that Stefan just mentioned. But anyway, does anyone think it's worth doing examples in other systems? I think with Circle CI, it's going to be very non-standard because everyone kind of does their own thing with Circle CI. It's a bit more
so the Circle CI actually gives you an ID, and it's always even
sorry, I mean, yeah. No, I don't mean with the ID specifically. I mean an example of the whole workflow.
Oh.
I've given an example of the GitHub action that, in fact, it's very minimally. It's taken from our own builds, so it was easy to do that one. But is one example enough? That's the question.
I would say one example, it would be nice, this is just a personal opinion, I think it would be nice to give other examples, but I don't think that should be a blocker. What might be one way to handle that could be to open an issue or a discussion topic or whatever, and ask people from the community to, if they would like to discuss or collaborate on other examples, because this is a community effort after all. So we could just state our intention to do that there.
Yep, that's a good call. Yeah, and invite people to submit their own examples. Could be tidied up potentially.
Yeah, Kingdom, if you can, I know you are a Jenkins user, so maybe if you can look into if Jenkins build IDs are actually working and they give you a new number, a new ID every time you run it, even if you run the same commit manually several times. And
They do. It depends heavily on, in Jenkins, it depends on your job ID, though I haven't found a way to get a global build ID from a Jenkins server. So where you might have issues is if you're on a multi-branch pipeline, for example, and you have a new job that's created for each branch, your build ID is going to start over at 1. So,
so it's not usable. You need to use date minus s as well.
I would use the timestamp with seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning Jenkins and CircleCI in the guide and tell people don't rely on IDs. Try to use the date.
Yeah, if we have
GitHub and Jenkins.
Yeah, if we have specifics on serial numbers for those systems, I have a bullet point list of. I can make it into a table that says these things you can rely on, these things you can't, that sort of thing. And the reason I have a bullet point list is because I give people the environment variables to use for the branch and the commit SHA one. So I can make that into a table that mentions all of the things.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And are we happy for a PR review, just regular PR review process? Like someone looks over it and says, this seems fine.
I'll read it tomorrow once again, I promise.
Okay, yeah, that wasn't a dig at anyone. Okay, I'll make a couple of changes that you suggested, Stefan.
Thank you.
And that were otherwise suggested.
So we are aiming for tomorrow, right? The 08 release, and try to get it done.
Yeah, what were the things that were not the guide and the libgit to SSH?
The only thing left was variable substitution in customize controller, base style variable substitution.
As in, you want that to be in 08?
I've put it on the list, but I can remove it if we agree that it shouldn't be part of 08.
Well, we can discuss it. We've got 5 minutes or so. Do you want me to? It's already been approved, I think, by at least a couple of people. Do you want me to approve it as well, to kind of do a full round of green stamps?
Yeah, my goal would be get these as it is, let people use it, then implement a substitution from that mimics what Helm release does. It takes those values from a secret or from a config map in the same namespace as the customization object. So people can do their magical bootstrap thing and have, I don't know, pre-provision things like region, zone, cluster name, and so on.
Yeah.
And now that we also have, so inside the customization object, now you can override or specify JSON patches and strategic merge patches. I think we should write inside the docs that the variable substitution should be used as the last resort. If nothing of the native customized things work, if you cannot patch it with a JSON, if you cannot write a strategic merge for the thing you want to change, only then you should, alter your YAMLs and put variables in there. Because once you do that, you can no longer do customized build apply. You have to do customized build, pipe that into env sub, and only then do a dry run or do a validation with kubeval or OPA or whatever. So it adds one more step to everything, to your CI, to your validation, to your local workflow, and so on. So I think we should get this feature in to help Flux One users that were relying on sed or msub or bash substitution. But I think we should make it very clear that this isn't the way to do it. You should try to create an overlay for things that you are modifying, even if it's more verbose. Like you have to copy, for example, the API version, the kind, and the metadata to create a patch. You cannot just say, hey, replace this value here. But even if it's more verbose, it helps you define a structure to your changes than just replace this stuff everywhere. And if it matches something else, it will also replace that. One good example is you have a config map with some script that maybe does a migration or does something for your application. And if you have a variable that conflicts with whatever you are using in your YAMLs, that variable will also be replaced in that script, and for sure it will mess up everything there. So
I think it's worth writing some pretty strongly worded documentation about it. Let's say, like, as you say, it's a very niche requirement in some ways, and shouldn't be used as a kind of general purpose templating thing, right?
Yes.
I think that will be even more clear when there is a substitute from feature, because that is kind of the niche. The use case is, I have some kind of runtime things that I don't want to put in my Git repository. I want them to be done at runtime. That's we could also point out the nature of the foot catapult. So the stuff you mentioned, and also you have to make sure that the values you're interpolating in don't have white space in them, in like carriage returns and stuff, new lines, or tabs probably, or quotes, and so on and so forth. Good luck, everyone. But it does fulfill a need. I certainly recognize it does fulfill a need, and it's so simple that you can tell what's gone wrong, probably.
Yep, and I really hope people will be using CI to validate this replacement before it reaches the cluster. Like with everything, like people should be doing customized build in CI and not merge to main unless that actually works. And it's even more important now with variable substitution to have a gate before the final thing ends up on the cluster. So you don't have to look at, I don't know, a Slack message that's like this and everything piled up there. And it's too late because it's on the cluster and you have to.
And there's just a single wrongly indented line somewhere that is the problem.
Yeah, and because we use kubectl, and I don't know when we'll be able to, switch to server-side apply without kubectl, just use it as a library. Since we'll be able to do that, we rely on kubectl output to tell people, hey, something failed. And kubectl output, for example, doesn't output the namespace of your thing. It will say deployment X has some invalid structure. But if you have thousands of YAMLs in there, hundreds of namespaces, it will be very hard for you to figure out where that particular problem is. Also, customized build will tell you the line number where some invalid YAML or value is there, but the line number is after the build. So the line number is for all your YAMLs merged into a single one. And that doesn't help you at all tracing back where exactly in all my repos or in my huge mono repo, where is that line? So unless people do something before in CI or locally to detect this kind of malformed YAMLs before they are pushed, it will be very hard to debug it by just looking at customized logs or Helm controller logs or events or Slack messages.
I just have a quick question before we call it a day. Stefan, are there any CLI changes to the bootstrap command? I'm just thinking in regards to the Terraform provider.
Yes, so I made the change today, it got merged. So the issue is you have taint nodes that you don't want anything there but, let's say, Kubernetes controllers or just Flux, and you cannot bootstrap for untainted nodes at all because they will not get scheduled, source control not get scheduled there, so it cannot do the first initial sync. So you cannot patch it afterwards, after the bootstrap. So to solve this, I added a new flag to install, to bootstrap, and to manifest gen. So that can be ported now into Terraform, where you can specify tolerations for the Flux pods. You can specify, hey, my Flux pods are okay to run on nodes tagged with Flux only, or whatever taint you are using.
Yeah, I saw that issue, the guy who created it on the Terraform provider. In that case, I'll get a PR done tonight for just like the from the based on like importing from the master branch, and then we can just update the version when Flux v2 gets released, and then we can just release Terraform provider after that.
Great.
So we're not lagging behind too much in the CLI. It was just, that's generally the biggest complaint we get is like people going, the CLI updated it, but the Terraform provider doesn't. It's usually me not staying up to date in what the CLI has done.
No, yeah, we definitely have to release the Terraform provider at the same day as the CLI.
Yeah.
Our block was an exception because it was such a major change that we couldn't do it, but we should be doing it.
Yeah. But I'll get a PR ready tonight, and then we'll just like flip it over when Flux v2 gets released.
Thank you very much, Philip.
Great.
Okay, we've gone a few minutes over. Does anyone want to volunteer to moderate or take notes for the next meeting?
I will do one of those things.
Which one you want to do?
How about note taker?
Cool. Okay. Anybody feel like moderating? And if we don't have a volunteer, that's okay. We can just assign, someone can volunteer between now and the next meeting.
The next meeting is the early one, right? You'll not be on it, Scott, for example.
Correct. Yeah.
I think it's only the Europeans that are on FM Kingdom.
All right, I can do it. I was just checking my calendar to make sure I'm actually meeting.
Okay, great. Yes, and so the early one is, sorry, I just want to put the right date on so people know when to come. The early one is
A Wednesday, right?
Give me just a moment. I believe so. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Oh,
Ethan,
that
are you
reminds
sure
me.
you want to take notes? It's like 10 in the morning here, I think.
Yeah, taking notes is
silly in the
great.
morning for you.
I can be fairly quiet while I take notes. I won't disturb anyone in the house.
I was more thinking about whether you're going to be awake, but okay.
I think we mentioned last time that we want to move the early one 2 hours. Yeah, so instead of 10 a.m. UTC, should be 12.
Oh, do we want to do that for this next one?
Do you want it during your lunch, Michael?
Yeah, that's fine for me. I can work around that.
Okay. Yeah, because it's 1 o'clock here, so it's.
I won't be able to make it at that time.
No?
No.
Okay, so let's leave the next one the same then. Because
Okay.
the change was for you, especially, so I have to wake up at
Thank you.
6.
I'll make a to-do item.
Yeah.
Okay.
Discuss this in the next meeting. I'll just
Good
make
idea.
that. Yeah. Okay, great. So I'll put the time on, and we can go ahead and close the meeting unless there's anything burning that someone wants to mention to put in the notes for next time. Besides that.
Quick thing, in the notes it's recorded that there's an action item to add Kingdon to the maintainers file, but what I thought we agreed on was giving Kingdon write access to the repo.
Oh, that's correct.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's correct.
I misinterpreted that. Because I thought maintainers was mentioned, or I guess it was, but I think I must have spaced out on the actual response. So thanks, Michael.
No worries.
I will remove that. Yes.
I'm not against that. That's just not what we agreed. We can talk about it as well sometime. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful
Thanks for moderating.
No problem. See you next time.
See you. Bye.